I'm thrilled to have Jason Ya as our guest today. Jason is a PhD student at the University of Toronto, and he's doing some really cool things with Obsidian, particularly in regard to his research and the work that he's publishing or in the midst of publishing, doing much of it through Obsidian. So it's so cool. He's been an active participant on the Discord forum, contributing to a lot of the discussions that are going on in Obsidian. And it's great to have him on the program today and to showcase some of the work that he's doing. So Jason, welcome.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, and just great to get to know you, Anthony, and love to be able to share about my experiences with Obsidian. So I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Well, we're very appreciative of it. So first, before we get into and really want to kind of hope you'll to see some of your screen sharing and how you go about capturing notes and linking your notes and producing your content. But before we even get into that, how did you even discover Obsidian? You know, what led you to it? I think I remember you talking at one point that you had explored Rome, but you couldn't get in. But what led you to this whole path and to discovering Obsidian?
Yeah, I think it began with my master's studies, and then eventually my doctoral studies, with the idea of doing research that is very cross and interdisciplinary. So I'm forced to just dabble in a lot of disparate areas of research. So my primary focus is studies on religion. But if you know anything about religion, it spans into anthropology, sociology, and even nowadays with neuroscience. So you really need to be familiar with a wide range of literature from various disciplines and industries. And at the time I was using Google Docs, which this was probably, 5 to almost 10 years ago. And that felt state of the art because everything was stored in the cloud.
Right.
In comparison to Microsoft Word, Google Docs, you're able to search multiple files at a time. But as
Table
I was
of contents and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Google Docs at first was great. I loved it. I could access it on multiple devices. But then there was just so much lag because a lot of my text files were just becoming just unruly and just very big. And I think
Even
the big
the
thing
speed,
was,
sorry to interrupt, but even the
yeah,
speed of opening a Google Doc is painful. Like, there's the wait. You click and you wait and,
exactly. So the pain, like the loading time and then the scrolling time,
yeah.
all of that just adds up. And the other big thing was it was really hard for me to, I guess the way I take notes is I take notes based on the particular chapter, article, or book that I'm reading, because I don't want to take things out of context, because that is one of the problems, methodological problems in just academia in general, but specifically sensitive in my area of work, where you just take one quote or one line and you basically misconstrue it and take it out of context.
And we're going to get into that more because I know there's a debate in academia of atomic notes versus more integrated. And so once we get in, would love to kind of hear your thoughts on that. And we'll get into some Zettelkasten sort of thoughts as well from you. But so not just the whole research thing, but if I'm not mistaken, the fascinating topics that you're getting into, religion across all those domains, but also in a specific geographic region, if you will, of kind of the whole Mediterranean world really is, so not just anthropology and sociology, but even getting into some of the geopolitical types of aspects of that region, of that time, and the implications of that.
Exactly. So you're just scratching the surface of just how just wide ranging this can be. So as I was progressing with Google Docs, I have so many documents in Google Docs. One thing that came to my attention is the concept of inline tagging. And I'm probably dating myself, but I thought that concept would be so useful and robust, because again, as much as I am taking notes chapter by chapter, article by article in these disparate fields, what actually enables fresh research and contribution to the field is being able to take some of these seemingly just outlandish ideas and
Disparate,
synthesizing it. Exactly. Synthesizing it in a way where you're creating new interpretations, new perspectives, and from there you raise new questions. And that's where things get really exciting. So I was thinking about the concept of inline tagging would be so powerful for Google Docs. Um,
And I
but
guess the closest you could get to that would be linked bookmarks, which is not very effective.
exactly, yeah. So one of the problems with that was you still have the problems with speed. And then whenever you make changes, I think those links, I'm pretty sure they broke. They may have changed that recently, but at least from my experience, it just wasn't reliable. So then I looked into things like, I probably forget some of the names, like Microsoft OneNote.
Yep.
I think they said they had something like tagging at the document level, but not inline tagging. And I think maybe there was the option for that, but it just wasn't working the way I thought it should work. There were some other web-based applications that I was using. And again, I kind of forget some of their names. Then I stumbled upon Roam, where with a bi-directional linking, I just felt like that made inline tagging, it's almost like inline tagging on steroids.
Yep.
And that was very attractive to me. Like you mentioned, I wasn't able to gain access, but I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and it really looked so powerful and the potential just seemed just really just unbelievable. But then I was on the wait list, and then the rumors of the pricing, which, you know, as somebody in academia, it's not like you have that much extra funds. So somehow I forget how I stumbled upon Obsidian, but I think I don't know if it was YouTube, if it was Reddit, or just some search forum. I was looking for Roam-like applications, basically. And then I stumbled upon Obsidian. There were some other ones that I thought had similar feature set, but I began with Obsidian because the response time was so quick. So once I submitted a request for the beta version, I got it within a few hours.
Yeah.
I got a Discord invitation, and I think the immediate draw was the community. So I didn't know at the time, but it was the developers who welcomed me to the Discord
That's
community.
Right.
Yeah, I thought they had like a welcomer, like assigned role, but she was actually the developer.
Yep.
And then I saw like the feature list, the bug list that was created by the community. I saw the interaction. I had questions. A lot of them were very ignorant, but people were so gracious in responding to them, and it was very helpful. So the whole, I guess, the ethos of Discord just really drew me in. And then I guess, you know, obviously it speaks for itself. The application itself was just a delight. I mean, I was using the application at least 12 hours a day, nonstop, from the day that I got it till basically now. So I don't know when I received the invitation, maybe April. So it's been almost like 9 months where I'm basically using it 12 hours a day, and it's a delight to use. And especially the fact that, you know, all of your files are stored locally. I still have that backed up, but in terms of performance, like it is just blazing fast. And when I did have access to Roam, and they actually did grant me a full year of just free service. So I'm very thankful for Roam, and I'm just, so I don't want to slight Roam in any way. But as I was using Roam side by side, just tentatively with Obsidian, one of the biggest problems was just the performance. With Obsidian, things were just so much faster. And when you're doing
and Roam is database based, right?
Yeah,
it's using Firestore, it's using Google's database, and Obsidian is file based. But I appreciate what you're saying and your whole journey. I had a very similar journey where I too had so many notes in Google Docs, and I was actually using Roam, and I was one of the early members of Roam, contributing to some of the CSS communities. And I'm not a CSS expert by any stretch, but I can navigate my way through. And so and I liked Roam, but when I discovered Obsidian, well, actually there's a step in between where what I didn't like about Roam was the database based, and not just because it's database, but I preferred to have the files myself and sort of to be able to own my files. And I found myself backing up a lot because in the early days of Roam, and by the way, I think the developers of Roam are superstars, just like I believe the developers of Obsidian are. I mean, there's really, really talented people, but for my needs and what I needed to do, Obsidian was much better. But before I discovered Obsidian, I actually decided to build my own. And so I rolled my own system, and I built it on top of the open source Quill.js project, and built that. And it was doing pretty much everything that I wanted to do. But every time I wanted to make a change, it was kind of painful. And then I saw Obsidian and how fast. I had seen it in the early days, tried it a little bit, but how quickly they evolved. And then to your point, not just the receptivity of the community and the warmth of the community and the embracing by the community, but how receptive the developers are, like Hat and Silver, to what the community is saying, what they want, what they don't want, what they like, what they don't like, and just the speed at which patches were, and the transparency of, especially with the graphing performance, which I don't know if you were around in those days, but the work that they did to improve the performance of the graphing was great to begin with, but they made it spectacular in a short period of time. And just the work that they do to support the community is just wonderful. So like you, it wasn't just the app, it was the community. And then I thought, why am I wasting my time on my own app just for my own needs when this does 99% of what I want, and it's way, way better.
Mm. Yeah, no, my experience has been just so positive. It really is a joy to use. Like in some ways, I feel like I'm going to miss using Obsidian once I'm done my dissertation, which is just weird,
There'll be more papers.
Yeah.
There will be more. Okay, so with that, Jason, how about kind of let's jump into screen share and maybe start with because you embarked on if I'm not mistaken, it was a three-month research project that you were doing to publish something, and you used Obsidian for capturing your notes, for linking the notes, and for actually writing your article. And so maybe just take us from the beginning of how do you capture notes? And I'm sure this will start to get us into the atomic note kind of debate and discussion on that. And maybe talk a little bit about your philosophy of note taking and note linking and how you go about it. And of course, there's no one size fits all. Everyone's got to kind of find their own methodology that works for them. But it seems like what you've produced in such a short period of time has been impressive. And we'd all love to learn kind of, some of your thoughts and some of your way of thinking that leads to that.
Sure. Yeah. I'll be honest, my flow is not the most structured. So this might require some editing. You might see me kind of fumbling through things, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the turnaround time with this one particular paper was just within a few months, which is just unheard of in my area, where I feel kind of bad even saying this because I think some of my colleagues, superiors are going to consider me as a fraud. Like, it only took you a few months. That's probably means
you're supposed to sleeve over this.
Yeah.
We'd love to see.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'd love to see it.
Sure. Okay. So should I just share screen?
Yeah, share screen. And maybe also while you're kind of setting up there, what took you into your field of research? Have you always been, fascinated by world religion and these topics? Is it, what drew you to this?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's interesting because my background is in software development. So like I mentioned, I also went to Drexel,
so software development, religion, of course, it's a perfect match.
Yeah, it's a linear progression. But yeah, so I spent about 5-6 years in software development, working as a project manager, product manager, and in the healthcare industry. So very lucrative, and it was very fun. Like conceptually, it was just very intriguing. But I think part of it was, one is I guess you can consider myself a religious person. So there was just that personal aspect of it where it always just struck a huge curiosity in my heart. But also I think just more objectively, religion is really at a core of so many people's thoughts and ways of living, whether or not we grew up in religious traditions, especially in the ancient Mediterranean period, where I think so much of our Western civilization, whether good or bad, whether religious or secular, however you want to categorize it, it derives from that type of culture. So it's been just a very fascinating thing for me to think, how did people think back then and
Mm-hmm.
how in some ways it's very different than the way things are now, but in some ways it's so continuous, and you see why the world is the way it is. And also, it's complex. So you do have to think about the sociological, anthropological, ethnographic, just the list goes down the line. I love complexity. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably what drew me to software development to begin with. And then this, I think, is just, even more, because we're talking about humans, and we're talking about culture, and we're talking about religious systems where the complexity is only exponentially multiplied.
Totally cool. And what's your thesis?
So yeah, my thesis is on a particular text written probably in the late 1st or early 2nd century called the Didache. And it's a text that is actually pretty important among both early Jewish and Christian groups. And basically my area, or my focus, is how has this text integrate its inherited traditions, but at the same time try to innovate those traditions. So yeah.
Very cool.
So let me do a screen share. Let's see what my Obsidian looks like at this point. Okay, so all right, here. Let me I was doing some work.
I see red graphite, my
Yeah.
favorite, one of my favorite themes.
Yeah, I love it. So whoever made it, sorry I don't remember your name, but thank you so much.
You know what? Let me echo that, because I've thrown so many shouts to Capano for minimal theme, which I use, and for the, I guess, is it called Andy mode, or the multi-page mode that Gordon put together, which I love as well. But I don't recall the name of who made red graphite. And yes, like you, I want to throw a shout out there, because it's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, so aesthetically pleasing. And, one of the things about the Didache is it's very interesting, because when I talk about religion as it being so diverse and interdisciplinary, one of the things about the Didache that's really influential is it touches upon so many different rituals and practices. So within each ritual, for instance, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, baptism, communal meal, like each one of those topics there is just a wealth of scholarship in each one of those things. So the Didache especially really, it compels you to just, there really are no bounds in terms of research. And I think that warrants the need for something like Obsidian to be able to capture all those thoughts and being able to come back to it so that you can synthesize some of the material. So I guess my folder structure is one thing that I can note. My folder structure is something that I had to come and tinker with over and over again. And I know for some of us, we're thinking, I think before you even utilize Obsidian, you're almost like a deer in the headlights. Like, how should my folder structure be set up? How should I utilize tags versus backlinks? For me, what I did was I just used Obsidian, and I just made my research the focus, and Obsidian is merely a tool to supplement my research. Yeah. So the reason why I emphasize that is because my folder structure has been changing over and over again. The way I use tags and backlinks, all those things have been modified as my research requires me. And that way I was able to focus on what I needed to do instead of being bogged down with some of these particulars.
Cool. It makes total sense. And I think it's a good caution to everyone that, Obsidian, as much as we love it, it's a tool. And the goal is not to have the most awesome Obsidian setup and the most impressive graph, although those are nice kind of, side effects. The goal is to produce quality content, to extend our thinking, to elaborate our thinking. And I would argue the goal even beyond that is to make an impact somehow, to touch lives somehow, to make a difference somehow. And so I think Obsidian can be a great tool for that, but it's so easy to get wrapped around the axle of, I have to do it this perfect way, and keep tinkering with the system and tinkering with the system and tinkering with the system. And you spend so much time tinkering and not enough of actually achieving the end goal of making an impact.
Yeah, and just to reinforce that, like, not only is Obsidian robust enough to handle all of those needs, but it's flexible enough so that when you do feel like you have to change the folder structure, change the way you use tags or backlinks, I'm going to show in a second, Obsidian is flexible enough to adapt to those needs. So you're never stuck in you're never pigeonholed to one way of using it. I guess I guess like some of my folders are pretty typical. Like one is just all my attachments. That's pretty straightforward. So these are all the images, so on and so forth. I really love that feature that they integrated. One is all of my authors, and you're gonna notice that some of my folders, like I mentioned, they're not right. I have some things that don't belong there. So again, that just goes to show that my focus is really on the research than the setup. But yeah, I have one folder for all the theorists, scholars, so on and so forth. So that, for instance, one particular author that I draw on his work many times, in this note, I have a list of all of his articles, books, papers, chapters that I have either written notes on or things that I know that I need to write notes on later.
Interesting. So let me just hit on that for a second, even though I'm kind of diving into the deep end a little bit, and I'd like to come back to the shallow end in a minute. But so rather than allowing Jonathan Draper to be a search query that would also show all the links that you've created, you can manually create a page for this person and manually put in all the links.
Right. One of the reasons why I do this is if I ever need to interact with a particular scholar, then I have all of his or her works there.
Yep.
And then it allows me to just have this view where it's based on scholar by scholar. Now, this is also due to the flexibility of Obsidian, is if I want the actual thoughts of that particular, if I want to interact not based on scholar, but based on topic or idea, for me, that's where I utilize tags. So for instance, if there is the concept of, I don't know, ritual or baptism, for instance, is a very popular one. I have that tag so I can easily search other people's viewpoints that are on the topic of baptism.
Okay, cool.
So that's one folder. Background is, I guess, you know, the cultural background, the political background, the sociological background of the Didache, which can go into a lot of different things. Like you mentioned, there's areas of politics. So this is sort of where I store literature that is focused not primarily on the Didache, but on tangential things that serve to provide a thicker description of that background.
That's an interesting thing that you did in there of prepending the year.
Oh,
I
yes.
presume so that you could say, show me the most recent research that I've captured.
Yeah, that might be something peculiar to my line of research, where the date is so important, because unfortunately, some scholarship just becomes outdated very quickly in light of new findings or new interpretive theories. So the date is really important for me, especially when I have, let's say, Draper has thoughts on a particular topic that he's written in 3 different articles. It would be very helpful for me to just quickly identify what is actually the latest one, because his opinion may have been nuanced during that time.
Yep.
Cool. So background, daily notes. This is an example of, I love how Obsidian is flexible, because for the most part, I hardly use daily notes, as you can tell. There's only 6 entries or so here. I know for other people, daily notes is part of the way you do your workflow. For me, I'm not like that, but there was a moment where I felt really stuck in my research. And I just felt like, I just didn't really know what the next steps were. I felt a little drowned and overwhelmed with the amount of literature. And during that time, I guess you can tell, end of July, early August, I did resort to daily notes, and that helped me tremendously. And that really crystallized and it brought to light some of the focal points and emphases that I needed to focus on, instead of being just drowned in the material.
I think that's a great observation. And I think that can be really helpful, using writing as a way, or journaling as a way, to get unstuck, if you will, to sort of take what's in our head, put it on paper so that we can sort of see it. And especially as a software engineer, I come from the engineering background as well, as a, for sort of taking it out of our heads, if you will, and being able to kind of look at it, parse it, consider it, move it around, squeeze it, synthesize it, and it seems to come through a little bit easier than it does all within our heads.
Yeah, yeah. And yes, I think sometimes I just need to make a list. So for instance, on this day, I just needed a list. What did I read so far? What are some questions for me to pursue? And within these questions, there are so many. How can I break it down into categories like rituals, sociolinguistics? So yeah, it was just really helpful. And as you can see, I haven't really been doing this since the summer.
I noticed also, I'm sorry to interrupt. I noticed also that you pretty much live and work in the editor. I don't see you switching to preview mode very much. Can you talk about that really briefly?
Yeah. I think I just got used to it. B, it's funny. I think aesthetically, I find the editor, I don't know if it's this particular theme, more pleasing. I don't know, maybe it's the font size or whatever, but I just, visually speaking, I'm able to grab it. And I don't like having to switch back and forth.
Right.
And I got a new keyboard, and one of the problems with this new keyboard is sometimes I get the keys mixed up. So when I do the hotkey, which I have as Command E to toggle edit, sometimes I hit Command W, which obviously is closing the note.
Yep.
So
that's
part
annoying.
of it is that. Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Now I also enjoy writing in the editor mode in red graphite, but I do switch back and forth. Particularly when I have images, I enjoy seeing the images that I've inserted in my notes.
Yeah, I will show you in a second the way I use backlinks that are where the text and the content is fully displayed and integrated.
Cool.
And in those cases, I definitely use the preview mode.
Cool.
So yeah, there's a folder called the Didache, which again, that is just so many different categories. There's the ritual of the Didache, so on and so forth. One thing that I do that might be helpful for some people who focus on reading monographs or edited volumes is I typically have a folder. So for instance, I should have named this better, an author named Jonathan Schwiebert back in 2008. And what I do is I create all the chapters as a particular note, and I tuck it in this folder. And then I have a file that has, it's almost like the table of contents of that particular book. So I have, for instance, this monograph. I have, how do I break this down? So yeah, I flagged the author here, Jonathan Schwiebert. I have my tags of relevant topics. Here is a very informal list. Again, sorry for the messiness, but just an informal list of other literature that I feel like is very relevant. That if I'm going to talk about Schwiebert, then I better be sure that I'm familiar with some of this other literature, and vice versa. So this is just a very quick list of that. And then I guess I can do it in outline view. So this is the outline for this particular note. And basically it's the table of contents of this book. So the book is divided into two parts, part one, and then part two. And then within each part, there are a series of chapters. And each chapter what I have is, it's a backlink to its own note, so that all the notes that I take for that particular chapter is stored separately. But then it's linked back to this so that it's not lost on some type of island.
And so the rationale for keeping your notes aligned with the chapter, talk a little bit about that versus your notes for the book, or versus splitting them out into, individual notes. You talked earlier about the idea of losing context, that if I were just to create a note on, my thoughts on the Last Supper from a Schwiebert's perspective, without it being in the context of the chapter of the book, it loses its significance. Do you want to talk a minute about that?
Part of it is the more immediate reason was a lot of edited volumes in my field, and probably other fields as well, where there's a volume that is written by a series of authors, and each chapter is written by a different author.
Got it. Got it. Now it makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah, that
All
was
right.
probably the most immediate reason. And then this,
In a sense, each chapter is its own book.
exactly, yeah. Each chapter has its own argument, and within that argument has its own premises. So I
Yep.
wanted to respect the integrity of each argument.
Okay. Now, how about then the whole chapter as a note versus, let's dive into one of those chapters notes.
Sure. So a lot of these are carryovers from Google Docs. So, okay, here, this one, nice.
Okay.
And then within here, the way I take notes on a particular chapter, article, or everything. So I have a link.
Oh, wow. When you said inline tags, you weren't kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the basic flow that I have is, I make sure I link it to the parent literature. I link it to the particular author. And then I have page numbers for citation purposes.
Yep.
Because again, you're going to have to know the pages for that particular chapter. And then I have just tags for that particular file. And then I have, the way I write the notes is, again, I want to respect the integrity of the argument. So it's other than the section called abstract, all these other sections are basically derived explicitly from the chapter itself. So, within this chapter, if you were to see it, page 19 to 20 is the introduction, page 20 is the oral tradition, so on and so forth, as you can see. And then this way, again, I really want to just step into the mind of the author and make sure that I'm disciplined and not taking anything out of context. So each one of these notes, basically, I just follow the main argument and the premises of that particular section. And I train myself to really do it at a paragraph level. Sometimes I'm not as disciplined, but at least at the sectional level, at least at the chapter level. And once I have finished reading the material and I have written all these notes, what I do next is a little different. Is I go to this one global file that I have. Let me just create the view a little bit better. And the global file that I have is called abstracts. And basically every single one of the things that I read, I write my own abstract. If the journal has its own abstract, then I copy and paste it, but I make sure that I write my own abstract, because one of the problems is you read a bunch of things, but you forget it. And one way to retain what you've read is, in your own words, how would you create the abstract? And what I focus on with the abstract is, I guess, three things. What are the main conclusions? What are the main premises that support that conclusion? And the third thing is, how does this argument intersect with my own research questions? And that might be, So the way I create the abstract is, oh boy, this is actually a bad example. I'm sorry, Anthony, but
That's okay.
Okay, so what I do is, so going back to Schwiebert, here, let me pause for a second and let me open the parent file and let me close the abstracts file for now. And the way I do this is in this chapter file, so I write my abstract here, and this is my summary of the conclusion premises. And then in this more, I use features that are not the way it was intended, is I use this code block. And this is a way that I can see this research interacting with my research questions. And the reason why I put it in a code block is because I want it very visible. Yep. Because again, I'm spending more than 12 hours on this thing. I'm constantly reading text. I need something that just jumps out to my eyes. And that's the reason for inline tagging, highlights, and using things in code block. So I might forget what this chapter was about. Most likely I will within a few hours. But this code block, it allows me to jog my memory of, okay, this is why it's relevant. And this is how I can actually utilize it in my research.
I don't think there's any wrong way to use it. I think it's cool. I would say quote block though, right? It's a quote.
Yes.
Yeah.
So once I have all of my abstracts, so if you think about it, I do this for every chapter. So for every chapter,
and these are all your words. This is your own synthesis of what you've read and putting this together and how it correlates with your thesis.
Exactly. So then I create an abstract and a list of ways that it can intersect with my research for every chapter. And then what I do is I use the backlink feature. And I create, so let's see here. Here, this is chapter 2. What I have is I have this where I'm pulling in the content of that chapter's notes, specifically the abstract section. Yep. So what ends up happening is if I just create, this, or if I just toggle to preview mode,
yep.
I have every chapter here, and then I have the corresponding abstract for each chapter. So if I ever need to jog my memory for this particular volume, not only do I have individual summaries of every chapter, but I have a list of the ways that it can actually intersect with my research.
And what you're utilizing here is a wonderful feature of Obsidian where you can embed not just another note, but you can actually embed a block within the note or a heading within the note, which is what the abstract is. You're pulling in that heading and you can refer to that. So
yes,
that's cool.
And the reason why I mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, the reason why I mentioned that this volume is not the best example is because with volumes, what I do is I store all the abstracts in the main table of contents page. But I'll be honest, most of my reading are from discrete journal articles. And for that, that's the reason why I have this, what I was trying to show earlier.
Yeah, the whole abstracts, all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Then what I do is like, so for instance, this was a 1968 article that I just read earlier today. And if I go to Layton, so now I have in the note for this particular article in the preview mode, because I have the section linked in.
Transcluded or embedded.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool, that feature, to be able to do that. When you write your abstract, Jason, do you do it in one go? Do you do it over time? Where are your notes? Are they partial notes, or when we look at one of these abstract examples, is this you've consumed this and now in one stream of consciousness, this all comes out?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a great point. What I try to do is when I write the abstract, and again, it shouldn't be too long. It should just be a paragraph, because if you really know the material well,
right,
and you should be able to make it succinct.
It's a good point.
I try to write it without even looking at the notes. So just off memory, can I summarize everything that I read in a paragraph? And then what I do is once I write this paragraph, for instance, of this article, after I write the paragraph, then I have the side-by-side view, and then I check. It's almost like I'm quizzing myself, and I go through section by section, and I try to figure out, okay, did I miss something, or did I miswrite something? And then I edit my abstract. I add things, I delete things, I modify things. And then, that's basically what I do.
That's cool. What percentage of times with this particular project that we're going through would you say is reading, and what percent of time is writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think because I haven't utilized some of the the ability to plug in, for instance, Zotero and other options, I've been using this, I would say 75% of research and reading, and the other 25% would be drafts. And I would say the ability to write drafts, that in itself is that's so difficult in research. And Obsidian has helped me, and that's a whole nother ballgame where Obsidian has provided so much value. But I'll be honest, once I'm done with the draft, because I haven't tinkered with the plugins, and again, because my focus is on the research, not so much on the tool, I do the actual polishing and the writing in Microsoft Word.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's that.
Do you ever use the graph feature to look at your connections for your research?
Honestly, I really don't. So my graph view may not be that impressive because I don't really.
Well, it's not a question of impressive. It's more a question of
Yeah,
does it
utility.
help you?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what has helped me was, for me, I love whiteboarding. So when I do have a bunch of ideas, main topics, I like to create just like a web of ideas on my own. This to me, I think the reason being is because my notes are not determined by idea, it's by the actual chapter and article. And I don't think that makes this graph view very as helpful. And I was one of the people that suggested, maybe we should have graph view that's based on tags, because in my, even though it's not the most airtight way of doing things, tags for me are the ideas that can span across various chapters and articles. And therefore graph view on tags to me would be more useful. So that's why graph view has never really been.
Although, open up your filters for a second. So let's because one thing, for instance, so I've read, yeah. Well, this will show the tags, and you can filter by tag. In the filter, you could say tag : and type in a tag. Yeah, see if that works.
Do I have to put the number sign?
I don't know, because I don't search on tags.
Yeah.
Try one that has a smaller number of,
yeah,
maybe like baptism or something. Try it with and without the hash. Try it with the hash now. Let's see. Yeah, even that's so enormous. But if you click on one of those, I'm going to guess that like Lou 2004 on the far right, that little, yes, that one, I'm going to guess that has the initiation tag in it somewhere.
Oh,
what's it? Oh, that's an empty. Maybe that's a neighbor.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as you can see, I haven't really plumbed the depths of the feature-rich list of things that Obsidian can do.
No, it's totally cool. What I was going to ask is, so open up the filter, and so something like, so I've read a little of Karl Popper, and so I'm curious how Popper would link into your, so type in Popper there. Let's see, and let's see which, which files. Okay. So an interesting thing for me would be, okay, here's where Popper is referenced. Where is he not referenced that maybe, he could play in? So for instance, it would seem of value not just to look at where, what's in, but also what might be missing, for a particular line of research. So I'm curious now, as a total side note, how Popper integrates into your, into some of your notes, some of your abstracts.
Do you want me to zoom into the abstracts?
No. I just meant purely as a personal interest, intellectual exercise, not for the usage of Obsidian, more that I'm just fascinated by that. But that to me, one of the things that I like using Obsidian for, and you mentioned this before, is finding connections that I wouldn't have found on my own, this like serendipitous connections. But I don't find them starting with trying to look for a serendipitous connection. I find them when I'm looking for something else and following links, and all of a sudden it hits me, oh, this is interesting, that, yeah, this is linked to that through a few different things. And so that to me is where, when I'm linking one of my notes with other notes, that's where I get those aha moments. That's where it really shines for me.
Yeah. The way I've been able to actually see that come alive is when I've, so like I mentioned, for me, tags are the topics that traverse different articles, chapters. But there are moments where some of these tags not only become so prevalent, but becomes something that I need to write on, that I need to develop on my own. And at that point, what I do is I actually create a backlink for that tag. Let me see if I have an example. It might be under my miscellaneous
Got it.
Folder where, okay, so this might be hopefully this isn't a bad example. Sociolinguistics. Okay, I think this might, was this ever a tag? Let me just double check, sorry. No, it wasn't. I thought it was. Give me a second. Okay.
That's all good.
Maybe innovation. Innovation is a theory, or not so much a theory, but an insight or concept that I heavily rely on for my dissertation. And I'm pretty sure innovation was, okay, yeah. So it was, I think it was originally a tag. Well, yeah. So originally it was a tag. And basically, I'm looking for instances where, despite the fact that in the ancient Mediterranean, most people were very conservative, and anything innovative was considered, was looked with much suspicion.
Right.
So I'm looking for, people are still innovating. They just do it in more subtle, sophisticated ways. So every time I see an instance, I tag it innovation, I tag it innovation. But then there came a point where I realized, you know what, I think this can become its own insight topic that I need to write upon. And this is actually one of the theories that I'm utilizing for my dissertation. So what I ended up doing was I ended up creating a backlink for innovation. And here I have a list of you know, theory and methodology. How would I actually write a theory on innovation? And then, you know, this is a little section on synthesis. So I have, I guess one group is rituals. The idea that rituals are always changing lends itself to the idea of innovation. Then I have the idea that changes are often based on community and the need for a group of people to have a sense of communal identity. So, and then here's a body of literature that speaks to that. That I create a list of. And then, you know, to do, these are some scholars or books that I definitely need to look into. It's been a while since I looked at this, so just forgive me for a second.
It's totally cool. One question related to this, though, is how do you, so now speaking to your overall workflow, so this seems like a fascinating topic and one very worthy of writing on, or at least thinking on. How do you decide what you're going to work on, where you're going to work on? Or does this sit here until you kind of stumble on and say, you know what, today, this looks like an interesting thing that I'm going to work on?
Yeah, this is where one of the problems with ancient Mediterranean is you don't have that much data. Like there aren't that many texts. Like for instance, if I was a historian on, let's say the 17th century, the wealth of information is just incomparable. So the thing about the ancient Mediterranean is because there's not much data, there aren't too many fresh perspectives because so much scholarship has like eked out every line of writing that is extant, that's available. So I think one of the ways that I figure out what is a topic for me to write upon is whenever I come across a text or an interpretation that I think can actually be more convincingly interpreted based on recent theories or insight, that is one. So I always look for those type of potential opportunities. And whenever I read through the primary data as well as the secondary literature, if there's a question that comes up and I feel like nobody's answered, then that is also a huge opportunity because again, in this area of discipline, so much has already been written on. So you're really like, you're almost like you're looking for scraps almost.
Right. Got it. How about how you pulled all, you know, the project you published back in November, I think it was, or December timeframe. How did you synthesize, pull everything together? What was the process you went through in
Yeah,
Obsidian
that's a great one too. And at the time, my folder structure was completely different. So let me see if I can kind of go back in time. But basically, there were certain files that really helped me with that.
Wow, you write in Greek too.
Oh yeah.
So you know Greek, German?
Yeah, my
French?
German is pretty weak. French is even weaker, but yeah, Greek is my primary, I mean, other than English, Greek is sort of the go-to expert language. Hebrew as well, just because a lot of early Jewish literature, early Christian, obviously they're interacting with Hebrew sources. A little, not too much Latin, but yeah, mostly Greek. And then a lot of scholarship were done by Germans. So I created this table of contents for my dissertation. And this is, very generic. This is going to be modified, nuanced, like considerably, but you got to start with something. So, typically introduction, methodology. The two main sections are canonical traditions, ritual prescriptions, and then you wrap it up with a conclusion. And then here are just some miscellaneous notes. And what I do here is I haven't worked on my drafts via Obsidian on anything other than, I guess, ritual prescriptions. So if I click here, maybe I'll create a new pane. Yeah, so good. Okay, so there is another file there. Let me do it side by side. The view will be a little bit better. And here, I think these are something else. Okay. So here I have it linked back to, my table of contents. It's related to the canonical traditions section, which, is tagged here. And then I have a Didache ritual brainstorm file that's been a working file that I've been using for a long time. Let me see what this looks like. And this is really rough. And this is something that I've just been adding on to over time. And these are just some thoughts that came up. And eventually, it wasn't structured or organized well enough for it to be its own standalone file. So that's why I just have it linked in case I just don't want to lose it.
Yep.
And then ritual and Didache outline. Okay, so here, now let me just make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so here what I have is, let me show you the outline view. So in this outline view, there are basically one section of my dissertation is analyzing all of the rituals that are found in the Didache. And like I mentioned earlier, there are many. I counted 10. And within each of these rituals, I'm going to have to read all the literature that's even if it's tangentially related on it, and then I have to write something that is a original contribution to scholarship. So each one of these will become either not a chapter, but probably a section of my dissertation. And I've done one on baptism, but I just haven't integrated the notes. That's the publication that's forthcoming. I did it for baptism. So that's
cool.
Other than a few things I need to refine, it's in the bag. And I'm very thankful for that. What I've been working on these days is giving, almsgiving or charity. And here, as you can see in the other sections, I haven't fleshed it out yet, but here I have. So I have the text of, let me just make this a little bit bigger. I have the text that I'm working with. So, giving isn't scattered throughout the Didache. It's restricted to, chapter 1 verses 4b to 6, and chapter 4 verse 5 to 8, and in these texts. So, and what I do is I put in the Greek here because I want to be able to just, when I'm working on it, it'd be great for me to just focus everything on Obsidian. And then, within the text, I have lexical entries for each one. And then this can get a little nerdy, but this is what I do is, whenever other scholars have written on a particular word, then I actually have,
Yep.
yeah. So I can just take a look at this and this, or maybe this is reference somewhere else. I forget what these references mean, but basically you have that ability to be able to do those type of references. And then commentary. So this
I
is,
think that hover feature, by the way, is so powerful.
oh my goodness, yes. I love that. Yeah. I wish you could just snap it. Like I wish you could just take this and just snap it and make it into a pane or something like that. But yeah, I love the hover feature.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a section for commentary because not only do I have to know.
Well, you can make it into a pane just by clicking the link.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sorry, by dragging the link.
Oh, okay.
If you drag that link to the top of switch to preview mode, I think you have to be in.
I see. Okay. Nice. Okay. That's nice. So yeah, like I have a commentary. This is where, verse by verse, all the different scholars who have written on this verse, I jot it down by verse. So these are all links. And then I have a section on scholarship. And this is more of not so much verse by verse, but anything that pertains to giving. I have it here. And this was a to-do. So this list here was what I had known before I began researching. So this only consists of 2 works, this guy here and this guy here. And then I had a to-do list, and my bibliography grew exponentially. And as you can tell, like there's so many pieces of literature. And then basically after I read it, I have a sentence. I have the abstract, of course, like I mentioned earlier, but I have just like a quick, is this relevant? Yes.
Yep.
Is it relevant? Yes. Because so much is going through my mind. This one is particularly relevant, and that's why I have a bunch of bullet points. I couldn't just say relevant. Like, is this good for theory and methodology? So I have all these different things here. I do have a tag called star, and that's sort of from my Google days, things that I should definitely look at next.
Yep.
I think I finished all those, so
that's cool.
So yeah, and then I have from here primary sources. So these are all the primary ancient literature. This I updated considerably. So this is a list that has been outdated and obsolete. And I'll show you where I ended up updating. So originally I had all of my notes in this ritual prescriptions layout. And this again goes to the flexibility of Obsidian. I realized it was becoming unruly because again, if you think about, if I create this amount of text for each section and there's 10 sections, this file is going to be unruly. So what I ended up doing was I created a giving notes, right? So from here, this is where a lot of those sections I mentioned, I copied over here. And that's why I based, and these are updated here now.
Yep.
So for instance, the commentary. So I was wondering where all my notes went because my commentary section is much longer. So as you can tell, in comparison to the other one, this is much lengthier because this is where I've been doing all of my updates. Yep. And then what I originally did was I had a section on giving scholarship that now I created this into its own note as well. Originally it was here, and this is where I have all those scholars that I mentioned earlier.
So this is your version of atomicity.
Yeah. And then my primary sources, that short list, I expanded it considerably here. I mean, this is probably the longest note. And then what I do was I created a synthesis where I'm jotting down big ideas, patterns, gaps, questions that continually come up. And I did this iteratively. So I had my initial thoughts, and then I had another thought specifically on the primary sources, and then my new thoughts.
Yep.
And then from here, I have another backlink with the giving draft. And this is where my giving draft.
Yeah, this is where it starts to come together.
Yeah. And then, you know, if I have it side by side with this thing right here, then it's, you know, I know where all the material is. Yep. All the backlinks are there. The page numbers, everything is already there. And let me see what I can do in terms of, let me just do the outline view this way. Yeah, cool. So I have introduction, compositional dimension, and then within each one of these I have, let's see, I thought I had, I have many subsections. And yeah.
This is awesome. So you've submitted your chapter?
No, I have the draft complete. I wanted to read a few other articles just to make sure I'm not overlooking anything, but I'm hoping to submit it later tonight.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I guess the turnaround time from my last article, which I think I wrapped it up in December or something.
Okay, yeah.
To this section or chapter, again, is another 3 months. And, you know, my supervisor might grill me and say, you forgot this body of literature or whatever. But at least with Obsidian, everything that I've read, it's here. And it's like, I can easily find the exact page numbers, citations, everything.
Very cool.
So I feel like in many ways, I'm just scratching the surface of what Obsidian can offer.
Even though you say that you're just scratching the surface, it's impressive what you put together. And it's also inspirational. I think it's really cool. And I think a lot of people are in academia who, at least on the Discord servers, and have an interest in using Obsidian, whether it's for producing papers or just helping them through their studies. But it's really cool what you put together, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to share some of that with us, and I can't wait to see what you produce in the future. Not only is it really fascinating how you're using Obsidian, but your personal interests and your desire to touch lives and make a difference. I really appreciate that. So thank you for your research, and thank you for all that you're doing, Jason. It's really cool.
Well, no, thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. And your questions were really helpful in being able to just organize. I guess one thing you might sense is organization is not my forte, but because of Obsidian and its flexibility, I'm able to pull it off. So thank you for those questions.
Cool.